I knew something was wrong the second I saw those tire grooves cut through the dew. Not normal truck tracks, not a neighbor turning around in the grass. Deep, deliberate ruts, like somebody came onto my land with a job to do and zero respect for the fact that a man lives here. I stepped out on my porch with a mug of coffee that had already gone bitter, stared past my split-rail fence, and my stomach just dropped. Because the spot beside my shed, the spot I'd stared at every morning for years, was empty. No tarp, no chains, no old machine humming quietly in the back of my mind like a heartbeat. Just bare dirt, broken cinder blocks, and the kind of silence that feels personal. My tractor was gone. Now, before anybody says, "It's just a tractor," let me stop you right there. That machine wasn't just iron and paint to me. It was the last thing my wife ever laughed at. It was my father's hands in the grease lines. It was my boy and me, working side by side in the dark when grief made the house feel too big and too quiet. And it was also how I kept my property from turning into a jungle, because the county doesn't care about your feelings when the brush starts creeping up. So when I saw that empty patch of ground, my first thought wasn't sadness. It was rage, the slow kind. The kind that doesn't shout right away, it just tightens your chest like a ratchet strap. And I already knew who did it. Because about 3 days earlier, a pearl-white SUV rolled up my gravel drive like it owned the place. Shiny paint, tinted windows, and one of those little license plate frames that says something like live, laugh, love, while the person driving it actively makes everyone miserable. Out stepped the HOA president, a woman named Celeste. If you've ever met the type, you know the look. Perfect hair, perfect nails, and a smile that never reaches the eyes. Clipboard in hand like it's a weapon. She didn't wave, didn't ask how I was doing. She just pointed past me and said, "Mr. Garner, that equipment is not in compliance." Equipment, she called it. Like it was a broken fridge I left on the curb. I set my coffee down, tried to keep my voice calm. "Celeste, that tractor's behind my fence. On my acreage. This land was here before your little neighborhood existed." She blinked like I'd spoken in another language. "The covenants apply to all exterior structures visible from the street." I almost laughed. "You've got to be kidding. You had to come looking for it." Celeste tilted her head, that plastic patience dripping from her voice. "This community maintains standards, and standards protect property values. You have 72 hours to remove it. Consider this your verbal notice." Then she turned around and marched back to her SUV like she'd done something heroic, tires spitting gravel as she left. I stood there watching the dust settle, feeling that old familiar mix of helplessness and anger. The kind you feel when someone with a title thinks it makes them untouchable. I didn't even know how much worse it was about to get. 2 days later, my son Mason and I drove into town for feed and hardware. We were gone maybe 2 hours, tops. When we came back, that tractor was already history. Mason hopped out before the truck even stopped. "Dad?" he said, and his voice went flat, which is how you know the fire is hot. "Where's Old Blue?" Old Blue, that's what we called it. A beat-up, sky-colored Ford from the late 60s, faded as a pair of work jeans, but still running like it had something to prove. I rebuilt that engine after my wife passed, because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. Mason learned to wrench on that tractor the same way some kids learn guitar. Not because they want to show off, but because it's the only thing that makes the world quiet for a minute. He found the security footage before I even got my phone out. We had a camera mounted on the corner of the shed, mostly because people out here like to accidentally trespass when they think you won't push back. Mason hit play. A plain tow rig rolled in like a thief. No company logo. No paperwork on the windshield. 2 guys hopped out. One pulled the tarp off like he'd done it before. And there she was. Celeste, standing off to the side with her arms folded, nodding like a supervisor at a job site. I felt my jaw lock. "That's trespassing," I said. "That's theft." Mason paused the video, zoomed in on the tow truck plate, and muttered, "Got it." I grabbed the binder where I keep every HOA letter they've ever sent me, because yes, they send letters about grass length and mailbox paint like it's national security. There was no official notice. No certified mail. No fine. No hearing. Nothing. Mason looked at me. "Call the sheriff?" I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But I've lived long enough to know sometimes the system moves slow when you need it fast, and fast when it wants to crush you. Celeste was the type who loved paperwork games. She tried to frame it like abandoned equipment or hazard mitigation, or some other polished lie. So instead, I said, we're going to the HOA meeting. That next Tuesday night, I walked into their community clubhouse, and it smelled like lemon cleaner and quiet intimidation. The board sat behind a long table in matching polo shirts, smiling like they were about to vote on flower baskets, not somebody's stolen property. Celeste sat in the middle like a queen on her throne, tablet in front of her, barely looking up. She clicked her pen and said, "Next agenda item. Violations regarding exterior storage. Mr. Garner, you have 2 minutes." 2 minutes. Like I was a child being allowed to speak at the grown-ups table. I stood up, slow, because I didn't trust my legs not to stomp. "You took my tractor," I said. Celeste didn't even blink. The association removed a non-compliant item. "No," I said louder. "You sent strangers onto my land and stole my property. No notice, no board vote, no hearing. That's not removal. That's theft." One of the board members leaned forward, some younger guy with a smug grin like he'd never been punched in the mouth in his life. "Sir, you received a verbal warning." The equipment was visible. I pointed at him. "My landline stops your authority 10 feet short of that shed. I have the parcel map on file at the county." Celeste's smile tightened. "We received complaints from multiple residents. We acted in the community's best interest." That's when it hit me. She was used to saying things like that and watching people fold. Multiple residents, community interest, standards. Words that sound official, so nobody questions them. I leaned forward. "Give it back," I said, "or I file a report with the sheriff and I go after the towing company for trespass." Celeste tapped her tablet like she was bored. "The board will respond in writing within 30 business days." 30 business days. Like my tractor was a warranty claim. I walked out of that building with my hands shaking, not because I was scared, because I was trying not to explode in front of a room full of people who'd forgotten what shame feels like. When I got home, Mason was already in the shop. Not pacing, not yelling, working. I found him under the bright shop light, sleeves rolled up, pencil behind his ear, flipping through pages of HOA bylaws he'd printed out. He didn't look up right away. "She thinks we're dumb," he said. I let out a breath. "She thinks we're tired." Mason finally met my eyes, and there was that look. The one I'd seen a few times in his life, when someone tries to corner him and he decides, quietly, that it's not going to happen. "I read the rules," he said. "All of them." "Okay," I told him. And he slid one page across the table and tapped a highlighted line. "They ban unregistered agricultural machinery visible from common areas. Not tractors, not farm-use vehicles. Unregistered equipment." I frowned. "Where are you going with this?" Mason leaned back, and a slow grin spread across his face. "You know Celeste's SUV? The one she babies like it's a newborn?" I stared at him. "Don't. I'm not talking about vandalism," he said quickly. "I'm talking about legal. Paperwork legal." Then he told me something I didn't even know. Celeste had dropped her SUV off at a local shop for repairs, and apparently she'd been dodging the bill. That shop belonged to a guy named Lenny, a mechanic who'd known my family since before that neighborhood had sidewalks. Lenny owed me a favor from years back, when I helped pull his truck out of a flooded ditch during a storm. Mason said, if she doesn't pay, Lenny can file a mechanic's lien. After the waiting period, he can take ownership and sell it. I blinked hard. "That's real." "It's real," Mason said. "And she ignored every notice because she thinks rules are for other people." Then he nodded toward the welder in the corner. "So, if her precious SUV becomes a farm-use vehicle, titled, registered, inspected, and parked in the exact spot she complained about, what does she do?" I should have shut it down. I should have told him to let lawyers handle it. But I'll be honest. Something in me, something old and stubborn, felt a spark of hope for the first time since that tow truck pulled away. I pointed at him. "No threats. No damage. Nothing illegal." Mason's grin widened. "Dad, I'm talking about the most annoying kind of protest. The kind you can't arrest." 3 mornings later, I walked out to the shop at sunrise and nearly dropped my mug. There, under the light, was something that used to be a luxury SUV. But now it sat higher, with bigger tires, reinforced suspension, and a welded-on front attachment that looked like a plow had married a bumper. Mason had bolted on a slow-moving vehicle triangle, slapped a farm-use plate on the back, and taped a laminated stack of paperwork inside a clear waterproof sleeve, right on the driver's side window. It was ridiculous, and it was brilliant. Mason wiped his hands on a rag. County inspector comes next week, he said. But everything's already filed. I walked in a slow circle around it, half laughing, half stunned. You turned her SUV into a tractor. He nodded, proud as hell. Technically, it's a multi-use utility vehicle. Legally, it's a motor vehicle. Functionally, it's going to make her lose her mind. By Saturday morning, we rolled it into place behind my fence, right where Old Blue had sat. Same angle, same visibility. Just enough that somebody who wanted to be offended could see it. It didn't take long. First came an HOA patrol in a golf cart, staring like his brain couldn't process what his eyes were seeing. Then, right on schedule, Celeste appeared. Not in a car, on foot, marching down the street in crisp white pants, clipboard swinging like a weapon. She didn't say hello. She didn't knock. She rounded my fence line and hissed, "What is that?" I leaned back in my porch chair. "Morning, Celeste." Her face twisted. "This is harassment. This is intimidation. You vandalized my property." Mason stepped up beside me, calm as a surgeon. "Actually, this vehicle is legally owned by me. Purchased through a lien sale. Titled and registered. You want to see the paperwork?" Celeste slapped the binder out of his hands like she could slap reality away. "This is a mockery of the neighborhood." I took a slow sip of coffee. Kinda like stealing a man's tractor. Her mouth opened, closed. Then she snapped, "I'm calling the sheriff." "Go ahead," Mason said, and his voice was sweet as honey but sharp underneath. "We already did our homework." Sure enough, a sheriff's cruiser rolled in about an hour later. Deputy Alvarez stepped out, older guy, tired eyes, the kind of man who's seen every petty feud on earth and hates all of them equally. He walked around the converted vehicle, squinted at the paperwork sleeve, then looked at us. "You boys got time for nonsense?" he asked. "Not our favorite hobby," I said. "But we're not breaking laws." Celeste stormed over, practically vibrating. "They stole my SUV and turned it into a weapon." Deputy Alvarez held up a hand. "Ma'am, do you have proof it's yours?" Celeste sputtered. "It's mine because I bought it." Mason calmly handed over the title paperwork. "Actually, it's mine because I own it." Alvarez flipped through the documents, slow and careful. Then he handed them back and sighed. "No crime here." Celeste's face went pale. "But it's under HOA authority." I stepped forward. "That strip of land isn't. County line stops your enforcement short." Alvarez looked at her, deadpan. "And if you called us out here for nothing, again, we'll start treating it like misuse of services." Celeste looked like someone punched the air out of her lungs. She stood there, stunned, while neighbors started drifting outside to watch. People who'd never looked my way before. And then, like the universe wanted to really rub it in, a city code officer showed up. Hard hat, clipboard, no patience. She inspected the vehicle, asked Mason a few technical questions, looked over the permits, and finally said, "I've got to hand it to you. This is one of the cleanest compliance packages I've seen." Celeste snapped, "So you're allowing chaos?" The officer shrugged. "I'm allowing residents to follow the law." When she left, the street felt different. Like something cracked open. Celeste wasn't the queen anymore. She was just a woman with a clipboard and no real power behind it. That afternoon, Mason did something I didn't even think about. He emailed every homeowner he could reach. Not angry, not ranting, just the facts, with timestamps, photos, property maps, and one question that hit like a hammer. If they can take my dad's tractor without notice, what can they take from you? By nightfall, replies poured in. People told stories I'd never heard. Fines for kids chalk on sidewalks. Threats over wind chimes. Trespassing to measure plants. A retired vet said Celeste tried to cite him for flying the American flag because it clashed with approved color palettes. A week later, neighbors started asking about board procedures, budgets, vendor contracts. And then somebody found something worse. Money missing. Fake bids. Friends and family companies getting paid for community upgrades. Celeste didn't just overstep. She'd been feeding off the HOA like it was her personal ATM. Once that came out, it was over. The city demanded an audit. The board got suspended. Celeste's name vanished from the website like it had been erased with a sponge. And then, one Monday morning, a flatbed rolled up my driveway. On it sat Old Blue, scuffed and dusty, but intact. I put my hand on the hood and felt my throat tighten. Not because we won against Celeste, but because someone finally admitted what she did was wrong. Now here's where it gets messy. Because even after all that, not everybody clapped. Some folks said we took it too far. Some said Mason humiliated her. A couple neighbors muttered that people like me don't fit the image of a polished neighborhood anyway. Like grief and work and dirt under your nails are something to be ashamed of. And that's what I want to ask you. Where's the line? If someone steals from you using rules as a disguise, do you play polite and hope justice shows up on its own? Or do you fight back with the only language bullies understand, consequences? Was Mason wrong for turning her own game into a mirror? Or was it the cleanest kind of justice, the kind that doesn't break laws but still breaks the lie? Drop a comment and tell me straight. Who was right here? Who was wrong? And what would you have done if someone in power decided your memories, your property, and your dignity were just aesthetic violations? And if you've ever dealt with an HOA, a boss, a neighbor, anybody who thought titles made them untouchable, share your story too. I read them, I really do. And I promise, you're not the only one who's been underestimated.